Okay guys, so today we are going to implement some custom themes for Angular material. So first of all, what we have to do is to create a new Angular project using Angular CLI. So we can do ng new, not nest, new. And we can call it Angular material themes example. We can provide also a prefix which will be used for all of our components. We can call it Angular material themes example. And what we also can set during the creation of the project is also a style preprocessor, and we want to use SAS with the ending SCSS, which will be then later useful when we want to import and include the Angular material mixins. And this will take a little while because we have to also install all the dependencies, and there is quite some, of course. So in the meantime, we can talk a little bit about the Angular material. So it's kind of like the official component library from the Angular team, and it contains all the components which you basically need in pretty much every application you are building, like buttons, and for the form like inputs, selects, sliders, toggle buttons, and all these stuff, modals. And I mean, it's kind of like the basic components. They are implemented using beautiful material design guidelines, and I think, like, there is a lot of developers investing their time into this component library, and it's also used in many real world projects. And because of that, of course, it's pretty high quality, because all the bugs which were found couldn't really compare to something which you are building from scratch, because it's just much more manpower dedicated to it. So hopefully our project will be ready soon. And once this is done, then we basically just enter the project folder. Yes, so it's done. So now we go to the CD Angular material themes example. Cool. And what we have to do now is to actually install Angular material with all its dependencies. So we can use npm install -s to save it in our dependencies in package.json, and do angular/material and at angular/cdk and at angular/animations, which is basically the dependency of Angular material. You could use noob or no operation animations module, but I think it just looks much better with the animations. So let's go for that. As you can also see, Angular is pretty modular. So compared to AngularJS, so the version 1x, that you have to basically opt in for all these dependencies, and because of this, you can say like Angular 2 Plus is actually pretty lightweight. So let's try running our application using npm start and see if it runs in a browser. So again, it will build a little bit. This is like a development mode, so it will automatically refresh our application whenever we change any of its sources. So it was built, and let's now refresh the browser, and it works. So what we have to do now is to open our application editor, which we have already prepared. So here we have to kind of refresh, and we see it, and it will take a little bit while the application is indexed, so it knows about all its dependencies. It provides us with the code completion in our sources, which is pretty cool, and one of the main benefits in TypeScript, like this developer experience, that you can just basically write much less and you get so much help from the editor. It's amazing. So first thing we have to do is to actually import this browser animation module in our application module and use it, because it's the dependency of Angular material. Browser animations, no, module. Don't know why it takes so long just right now. Usually it's just much faster, but that's okay. Angular platform browser animations. Let's try again, and it works. Okay, so now what we have to do is add it to the app module imports, and this should work again. You can see like it's rebuilt. Perfect. So This is working, but we are not using any Angular material component yet, and we have to import them to do that. So import md card and md button and md select. In the real world applications, you will never really do this. In app module, you will create a separate shared module which then can be imported by all your feature modules, but for the sake of simple example, we can do it all together in our app module here. And again, all these modules which you have imported, you have to add to the imports property of the ng module of the app module. And once we have that, we can actually use those components in our template. So to do that, let's now go to template and remove all the stuff which was generated by Angular CLI and we actually don't need. Good. Let's add some MD card, and in this MD card we can create a material buttons, which is basically a standard HTML button with MD raised button attribute, and let's call it primary, which will come in handy later. And let's create two more called accent and worn. And let's create another card. As you can see, like this editor support is pretty great. And in this card we will have md select component, which needs child components of type md option. And this option can have value cat, and cats, and placeholder can be favorite animal, because everybody loves cats, right? So once we have this, we should actually see something, and we don't see anything. That means we made some mistake and we have to check what's going on. So this looks good. So what's up? So MD card, it says MD card was not used, so maybe we did. Oh yeah, of course, because actually we have to import not the card itself but the module, and same for the MD button module and MD select module. We can try to reformat our code so it looks better. Cool. So once we have this should actually start working for us. And it's still rebuilding. Let's see, why is our computer so slow? Yeah, shouldn't really be, doesn't really matter. So now it's working. So as you can see, we have this basic layout we created when we have these buttons and the cards, and they actually have some default styles already. So there is like some shadow and they have some shape and font, even though select looks kind of funny. To be honest, it doesn't really work properly. And this means that actually Angular material doesn't really work without the styles out of the box. You need to include some theme, and because of that the theme included some pre-built themes, and this is exactly what we are going to do right now. So we go to the main style CSS file and we import some pre-built theme from node modules, and there we go at Angular /material / pre-built themes. And as you can see, we have here 4 themes. 2 of them are light themes, 2 of them are dark themes. I will show you what that means later, but let's start with light theme indigo pink. Save it and let's see what happens. So right now the select already looks much better, and it seems to be actually working as expected with animation and stuff. Buttons are still white, and that of course is because we didn't say what kind of color we want to use. So many of these material components, they support color property, where we can say one of the 3 main colors defined by every Angular material theme, which are primary color, not class color, accent, and color worn. Cool. So, and then we got the color accent, and we got these colors from the indigo pink theme, as you can see, like the colors are there. So cool, we got the predefined theme, but what if we want to create our own theme with our own colors which are corresponding to the branding of our company? For that we have to create our own theme. So first of all we have to import Angular material theming. Then we have to include matte core mixin, and we have to define our own theme. So if I save this, we should get back to the original state. So we have the layout, but of course without any colors, because there is no theme included right now, just the core stuff, which is, as you can see, is like the card and the basic stuff like for the select, but no colors. So, and to define our own theme, we have to define 3 color variables. So let's call it my theme primer, and to define that we can use helper function from the Angular material theming, which is very cool. You can see you get like the code completion. You can go for matte palette, and here we have to provide some base color. So let's go cyan. Let's do my theme accent color and worn color, and here we can stay with the standard red like for the errors, and for accent we can do like a teal, for example. So now we define these 3 variables, but they are not used, and with those 3 variables we can actually create our own theme definition. So my theme, and for that we will again use built-in helper function called matte light theme. There are also dark themes, we'll get to that later, but for now we'll stick with the light theme. And basically what we have to do is to provide all these 3 variables we defined: my theme primary, my theme accent, and my theme worn. Cool. We will still not see any colors because we just defined a theme, but we haven't used it yet. And to use our theme, what we have to do is to actually provide this theme definition into a mixin which will apply it to all the Angular material components. So we have to include Angular material theme, and here we just pass our theme. And once this is done and compiled, we should see the colors again and the colors we define. As you can see, the buttons have now new colors as we define also for the select. So as I said, we have the light themes and the dark themes, and it's basically, so it's about the colors which are used besides those 3 main colors, and it's for the foreground and the background. So foreground is like a text, so some kind of very dark gray, and the background is like white for the cards, for example. So if we change these to dark theme, we will see that now backgrounds became dark, and also like that the select behaves a little bit differently. So but let's stick with the light theme currently. Another thing which you can do is to provide 3 additional parameters to the matte palette function, which are provided also with some default values if you don't provide anything, which is kind of like the default lighter and darker shade of the particular color. So let's demonstrate this. So the default is 500, so let's go to 800, lighter 700, and darker 900. Actually numbers are from 100 to 900. And once this compile, you should see the primary button became a bit darker. Let's go the other way around. Let's keep this one default, and let's make teal accent color lighter. So like the standard is 500, so let's go to 400, lighter let's do 200, and darker let's do 600, just for the sake of demonstration. And as you can see, again, it's different, and not only it's different, but as you can see, this accent here the font became black, and that's because all those colors have also like specified contrast color for all the texts, which works out of the box. So based on the shade, you will get either white or the dark text so that it's easily readable, which is pretty cool. And now we have one theme, but what if we want to have multiple themes and let the user select so that he can personalize his experience? Or maybe we want to create like a multiple brandings because we are building like some software as a service product, which then our customers can brand by their own colors and so that their end customers see the branded experience. So let's create my second theme. Basically, just repeat all these things. And my second theme, and let's make it a dark theme, and let's choose some different colors so that we see some difference. So let's go for the purple and for the pink, and let's just keep it default. And of course we have to include my second theme. And now basically the last theme wins. So which one I put last, that one will win, and this will not work for our example. So what if we want to be able to switch themes dynamically during the runtime, or maybe just provide like some variable during the build time so that the application runs with some predefined theme which was set up like in some parameters. So what we have to do is to wrap those themes in some class. So for the sake of argument, we do my theme class and my second theme class, and we will put these includes in those, so we basically kind of namespace them, and now again we will run without any theme. So what we want to do now is to create, so to basically dynamically assign a class to the wrapper div based on what we selected. So let's do class with the property theme, and let's change this select. Even though cats are very important, we have to change the select, so the placeholder will be the theme, and we will have two themes. We'll have my theme and my second theme, and we repeat it also here, my theme and my second theme. And what we will provide here is ng model for the theme property. And what we also want to do is to define this theme property on our component with some default value, which is my theme. And this will not work because we still have to include forms, because we are using the ng model attribute, and Angular is forms module, and Angular is very modular, and this really results in very small bundles and very quick load times in the beginning. So basically every feature is opt-in, which is pretty cool. And once we do this, this should work. Let's see what happens. So it's recompiling, and we are using the ng model directive, and we are binding it, and as you can see, this works. And whenever we change this, we can now dynamically set the class for our root, and based on that class we are activating some of the CSS rules. But as you may have noticed, the select kind of looks funny because it kind of doesn't have its background and it's just weird. And this is because select is the special type of component which is it creates an overlay over the standard layout, and this will not work out of the box. But fortunately there is a very simple solution. So what we have to do now is to import, so yeah, the constructor, but first we have to import overlay container from Angular material, and then inject this overlay container of type overlay container. I mean, like, I love TypeScript, guys. I really like it. I really love it. And we have to set this theme class also on the overlay container. And we want to do this also in the beginning. So use on init interface for our component on init. And because it's a TypeScript and it's interface, we can just implement our method, which is just amazing. And here we just set the team class to be our default team. And this is also not enough because we have to change it whenever we change the team. So we create a new handler on team change. And here we will do the same, exactly the same. Cool. And for this to work, we have to use this handler on our select. Of course, there are many different ways to implement this if you are using reactive forms or some other things, but for the sake of argument, this seems to be the simplest way to do it. So okay, we have our change handler on the select. On team change, we are setting the new team on the team class of override container. So let's save it, wait for the recompilation and see if this works. And it's still recompiling. There's something wrong with my computer today. For whatever reason, it's pretty slow. So, and as you can see now, the overlay created by MD select component has a proper background, and also when we change the theme to dark, it just works perfectly. So that's pretty cool. So what we can do now is to extract those two themes into separate files, so we make it a bit more nicer. So let's create a new themes folder, and what we can do here is to create my theme SCSS and my second theme SCSS, and let's just extract those theme definitions into other files. So my theme and my second theme, and this will of course now not work, so we have to import that stuff. So we go to themes my theme and themes my second theme, and it should still work as it worked previously. And as you can see, it does. It's exactly what we wanted, and all these things are just beautifully working. So okay, we created our theme files, and of course in this case you can add additional themes, and it becomes pretty simple to do that because you just add additional files and then you just import them. And of course you need some selector. Also, the selectors enables you to just subtheme parts of the application, so it's pretty flexible system. And what we are actually doing right now, we are theming all the built-in material, Angular material components. But what if we want to material our own components? So to demonstrate that, what we can do is to create another component using Angular CLI. So what we do is to do it, go to GitHub, cd meetup and cd Angular material. Good. And we can use ng generate component, and we want to call this component, let's say example slash parent, and we want to add it to module automatically into app module. This will add it to our app module declarations, because if we want to use in our template, it has to be declared. So let's see what happened. So we have a new folder, and here we have a parent component, and the parent component was added to the declarations of our app module, so we can just use it in our template. So if you look in the parent component, it has the empty parent selector. Good. So let's put this component into our template. Let's create another card, and let's put here the component. And as we can see, this component works, and that's pretty cool. So let's put some basic style on it. Let's wrap this stuff in a div and the text in h1. and let's div put some padding on it, 20 pixels, and border 1 pixel solid. And one of the things is like basically this styles file is imported into styles URL of the component, so all these styles are scoped to the component and they will never bleed out to other children components, so you can just really do any kind of barbaric selectors and you can be sure that it will be all right all the time, so it's not a problem. Anyway, so if we want to theme our own custom components, we have to create a new file which can be called parent component SCSS theme SCSS, which is actually not the official naming convention from the guide from the Angular material, but I like it pretty much because, as you can see, like those files are next to each other in the editor very nicely, so it's easy to navigate and understand. So, and here again, what we have to do is to import Angular material theming, and we want to create a mixin which should basically have the name of our component. So like this theme which accepts the theme, which is basically this what we're writing here is completely the same as what the Angular material theme did. So if you go here and you see this mat core theme, even though we can even click through, that's perfect. So as you can see, it's completely the same, and it accepts some theme and then it has the theme definitions. So what we want to do now is to create something same for our own custom component. So first of all, we want to extract the color variables, and for the sake of argument we'll extract all of them, even though in real use cases you should extract only the stuff you are using, of course. So, and to do that we have to do map get, and we want to get from the theme, and we want to get the primary, and it doesn't really like it. So what's the problem? Maybe I forgot something. No, it kind of looks okay. Let's see what happens, because this seems to be okay. Anyway, also what I like to do is to scope the themes on the component selector. But yeah, let's finish with the colors. Accent, worn, foreground, and background. Accent, worn, foreground, and background. And you may ask, how do you actually know the names of those variables and stuff? So this is actually pretty underdocumented in the official documentation, but what we can do is to check actually how this works. So if you go to our theme and we check the light theme, we see that the theme contains primary accent, worn, foreground, and background variables, plus is dark flag, which we actually don't use right now, but if you ever need it, you know that it's there for you. So, and once we extract those are kind of like the variables in themselves, so you cannot just use them directly. So let's check our layout. We have a div and we have h1. So let's do a theme. So we know, like in the component we have a div, and in the div we have an h1. And as you can see, I'm using here a child selector, which I will explain later, but it will be pretty useful when you want to nest your custom components and prevent like the style bleeding, which we'll demonstrate a little bit later. So what we want to do is to do color, and here we use matte color, and we want to extract the color, let's say from primary. So we say primary, and we'll get the primary color. And of course, this doesn't work because even though we define the theme for the component, we have to use it first. So to use it, we have to import it in our main styles file. So go to app, example, parent theme, and of course you have to include it too. So, and you will have probably more than one custom component, and because of that, it's easier to create a similar mix in the Angular material theme, which contains all the custom components. So we can copy this and create our own mixin. Let's call it my components theme, and here we basically include all the components mixin. So I can copy the name of the component mixin and pass the theme to it. And because of this, whenever we add additional component, we only have to add it in one place instead of for every theme. So if we didn't do this mix in here, then whenever you added a component, you have to add it to all the themes. And if you have many themes, this can get pretty repetitive and code application is never too good. So, and once we create this mixin, then the only place we have to include these additional custom components is actually here. More components here, and then this will just work out of the box, and in the theme we just include those two mixins. So cool. Now we should actually see our component having a theme, and as you can see, there is some problem here. So we did something wrong. So let's see what's up. We are importing Angular / material / theming, which seems to be pretty good. Oh, of course, not mat. It should be map, because we are getting the variables out of the map. This is, as you can see, editor is always right. It's so cool. And now the parent has the color, but the primary itself is like a compound variable, and by default it gets like the this basically is the same as writing this. But what we can also do is to do, as you may remember, we define like the default lighter and darker variants. So what if we do darker? And as you can see, it's darker. And to show this even better, what you can do is do a background, and let's do again a primary lighter, and here we just can do the default so that you can see it. And as you can see, this H1, or even better, what we can do is like to make it nicer. They are both of the primary color, but there is a different color variant, and when we switch the theme, this just works. So all those three, primary, accent, and worn, they have like always this like lighter, darker, and default variants. But there is another thing what we can do, and is to do like the primary and contrast. So what we can do is the default contrast. And as you can see, this is kind of like the same as in the button. So this contrast is meant to be used for the text. And this will also work with the dark theme. And it's based on the shade, so it just works. Also, what you can do is like the darker contrast and darker, which again is the white, because for that shade the contrast is the white color. Anyway, so you should never ever hard code any colors in your theme definitions. Always only use the variables. And what about this foreground and the background? So as you know, as you remember, like the foreground and background is basically used like for this stuff like the text and the background of some elements like buttons or cards. And they also have some variables in them. Unfortunately, it's not so simple. It's quite some of them, and it's not really documented. So this will probably now fail, and what we have to do is to check what kind of variables we have there. So if we go again to our theme definition and check, here is the foreground, and there is like this variable, and we can search for it. And here we see that like the foreground for the light theme has these kind of variables, so like it's the base, divider, blah blah blah. And for example, for the background, we see have a status bar. Let's go with the status bar. So let's, for the background, put status bar, and for the foreground just put text. As you can see, like, this is kind of like the gray and the text is black. And yeah, the status bar is meant to be black in the dark themes. So always, whenever, just always try to use, or you should really use, like, some of those variables. So let's just put it to something more nice for the sake of argument. Let's go with the primary darker, and or just no background whatsoever. We don't need that now. Let's just use primary, something simple, primary default. So that's cool, but what if we have like the nested components? So let's create another component. In the examples, call it child, which will be kind of completely the same. We have this a child, and the layout will change again. We'll create a div, we'll create the h1 in the child, and as you may remember, we were, and of course we have to use the child in the parent. So let's do what was the selector, empty child, suck, and child works. And as you can see, even though it contains h1, it was not themed by the themes of the parent, and this is exactly because of those child selectors. If I remove it, this will not work as we would like to. But if you always do like a full specific selectors with this child, you shouldn't have ever any problems, because always this child component is basically scoped by its selector. So in the parent, we can see that it's always in the element empty child, which you will never use in this style definition. So it will never bleed your styles into the children. There is another use case with the transclusion. So what you can do is to do ng content, and then what happens is, if you use this parent and you can put some things in it, so again put h1 ng content h1, and this one actually will be styled, because as you can see it's h1, and this will of course apply to that too. But there is a very simple workaround for that. So what you can do is just to wrap this ng content with div class ng content, and with this basically create another selector which you would have to specifically mention for the custom theme styles to apply. So, and in that case you shouldn't have a problem. Of course the div, so of course this shouldn't be called a div because we have this. So we should of course use a different selector, but those selectors don't really matter because they are scoped, so there will be never a problem. So let's call this wrapper and apply this class here too. And as you can see, then ng content is unstyled. So again, to recapitulate, what you have to do to have a style, to have the theme styles which doesn't bleed, to use like very specific child selectors which only apply to the element you really want. For the Angular child components, is not a problem because they are wrapped in their own element anyway, so it will never apply to them, as you can see here. But if you want to use transclusion, you have to wrap it in some selector, even though it repeats in every component, because this here doesn't matter because it's scoped, so that you break the specificity for them, and then it works, and you shouldn't ever have a bleeding styles. And that's all for today. Thank you for your attention.